the death penalty, the court will...
All of a sudden, those things made him very angry.
You are not important. 911, what is the address to your emergency?
By the Fourth Street Laundromat.
What is it?
Fourth Street Laundromat.
What's the problem?
On September 13, 2016, Ashland police received a 911 call from a woman who reported that she had been kidnapped. They did their best to rescue the woman, but were not prepared for what they were about to discover. The woman, only identified as Jane Doe, was tied up mere feet away from her sleeping abductor as she whispered for help, trying as much as she could to describe the man who was holding her captive and the house that she was in.
Who abducted you?
Sean Green.
Is it John Green?
Sean Great.
Where's she at now?
Asleep.
Where's she sleeping at?
In the bedroom.
In what bedroom?
There's two houses right by the Laundry Street. And it's in one of those houses.
Jane Doe met Sean Great at a community center in Ashland, where he passed off as a charming, God-fearing man. They would often eat lunch together and go on long walks together, frequently discussing the Bible. Sometimes they would play tennis at a local park. Though Sean wanted to have a romantic relationship with Jane, she only saw him as a friend and was not really interested in having anything more with him. On September 11, 2016, Sean managed to convince Jane to go with him to a house in Ashland, saying that he had some clothes he wished to donate. But when they got there, the charming and friendly Sean suddenly vanished, and in his place was this mean and cruel man who beat her up and strangled her before tying her up. He then proceeded to violate her for 3 straight days. On the 3rd day, after hours of torture and assault, Sean tied her up at the edge of the bed and passed out with his phone right next to him. When she was sure that he was dead asleep, Jane Doe reached over her sleeping captor as carefully as she could, picked up the phone, and dialed 911, still partially bound. She spoke as quietly as she could to avoid waking Sean. She told the dispatcher that she had been assaulted in every way imaginable.
Do you need an ambulance? Are you bleeding from anywhere?
Not anymore.
Where were you bleeding from? We don't have to talk if you don't need to, okay? Do you know where you live?
No. Oh shit, I woke him up.
You just set the phone down. Are you still there?
I'm a stalker.
What?
I'm a stalker.
Do you hear any officers outside?
No.
Okay, they're in the area.
Jane Doe was finally rescued and taken to the hospital while 40-year-old Sean Great was taken into custody. But there's more. While the police were searching through the house, they found the bodies of 2 women, Stacy Stanley and Elizabeth Griffin. Stacy's family had reported her missing a week before his arrest, and her body was found hidden in the basement, while Elizabeth, who had been missing for about a month, was found in the upstairs closet. Both women had been strangled to death. The house, which came to be known as the House of Horrors, was later demolished. But as detectives would later find out, there were more bodies. Sean took investigators to another house that had been burned down, and there they found another body belonging to Sean's former girlfriend, Candace Cunningham. He also confessed to killing 2 more women, including one called Rebecca Lacey, who allegedly stole $4 from him in a bar, and another one who was found dead in 2007. He told the police he thought her name was Dana, and after DNA testing, the woman was identified as Dana Lowry. She was 23 years old at the time of her death and had 2 daughters under the age of 5. Still, Sean claimed that he did not plan to kill Jane Doe and that they were going to get married. But after his confession, who can believe him? It was clear that the police were not only dealing with a kidnapper, but also a cold-blooded serial killer. Growing up in Mario, Ohio, Sean was good-looking, charming, social, and well-liked, especially by girls. He was always smiling and had the ability to make anyone feel like they were the most important person in the world. However, that was just a facade to mask what he truly was, a violent, manipulative, and cold-hearted sicko. According to his sister, Sean started harboring murderous fantasies toward his mother at a young age after she abandoned them when they were young. His behavior became more erratic as he grew older, and when he was 18, he was arrested for grabbing his then-girlfriend by the throat when she tried to break up with him. A few years later, when he was 22 years, he was arrested again for breaking into his pregnant 17-year-old girlfriend's home and choking her until she almost passed out. He spent less than a month in jail for this incident. The teen's parents sought a restraining order against him, but then a few months later, the ex-girlfriend asked a judge to remove the no-contact order following the birth of their child. About a month after his baby was born, he broke into his ex-girlfriend's home again, but this time with a butcher knife, and hid under her couch all night, waiting for the chance to attack. When the girl came in with her sister, he tried to assault her, and in struggle, the teen sustained a severe cut to her finger, and Sean was cut several times. And despite all these charges against him, Sean only spent 4 years in prison for burglary, violating early release conditions with an assault, and domestic violence. He was released in January 2003, and several months later, he was arrested again for domestic violence and put in prison for 7 months before his release in May 2004. For the next several years after that, police records show that Sean was involved in a few minor issues with the law, yet somehow managed to have 3 children with 3 different women after they fell for his friendly, nice guy persona. In an interview, Sean's mother compared him to the devil, saying that her son had the ability to charm anyone. Yes, he's good-looking, but the devil is good-looking too. He ain't no red horns and all that stuff. You find out he's charming, and of course, that charm can charm the pants off anybody. A female friend that had known him since high school believes that Sean might have begun to experience mental health issues while in his late 20s. He would put all his efforts into a project and then a couple of weeks later abandon everything and sink into depression. Sometimes the depression would be so bad that he would lay on the couch for days before returning to normal. Several people who met the real Sean described him as lazy and unwilling to work, preferring to take advantage of either vulnerable women or kind people, especially if they had money. Instead of holding down a job, he would hop from woman to woman, taking advantage of their kind nature and living off of them. Christina Hildreth, who met Sean in 2005 and dated him for 5 years, said that when she first met him, she thought that he was handsome and charming and had a way of looking at you like you were the only person he saw. But after they moved in together a year later, he started showing his true colors. Not only was he jealous, controlling, and abusive, he was also very violent and cruel. The violence escalated with time, and at one point, he beat Christina in the face multiple times and grabbed her by the throat. She broke her arm while trying to protect herself and had to go to the emergency room. When the hospital staff asked her what happened, she initially told them that she had fallen. But when Sean left her alone with a nurse, she told her everything that happened, and the nurse called the police. However, Sean took off running before he could be arrested, but was captured 4 days later when Christina reported that she suspected he was hiding inside her couch. When the police came, they actually found him there. He was sentenced to 180 days in jail for his actions, and Christina broke things off with him after this. She would later say that she believes this is what saved her life. Before that night, I feared he would kill me. That night only strengthened that fear. I now believe more than ever, had I not left him, I would be dead, or one of my children would be. In December 2011, Sean then got married to a woman by the name of Amber Bowman, whom he met in church. She thought that he was kind, loving, and attentive, but the love soured as soon as she got pregnant.
Just a couple months after we got married, we were going to church, we were tithing to our church, doing all the things I had always done, and all of a sudden those things made him very angry.
He also tried to isolate her from her family and would disappear without any explanation at odd times of the day and night. Less than a year later, Amber filed for divorce and got a restraining order against him, saying that he was threatening her and her family members. He even threatened to hurt his daughter, saying, "If I can't see my daughter, no one will." Sean was charged with the murder of 5 women as well as the kidnapping and assault of Jane Doe. At first, his lawyer entered a plea of not guilty on all charges on his behalf, but then in a press interview, Sean confessed to everything and even wrote a letter to a reporter attributing his motive to government assistance, saying that it took his victims' minds. They were already dead, just their bodies were flopping wherever they could flop, but their minds were already dead. The state took their minds once they started receiving their monthly checks. After this, Sean's lawyer had to change his plea to not guilty by reason of insanity. But then a court-appointed psychiatrist evaluated Sean, and he declared that he was not insane at the time the crimes were committed, so the defense counsel had to withdraw the not guilty by reason of insanity plea. Sean's trial began on April 9, 2018, and he showed no remorse for everything he had done. He was found guilty of the murder of Stacey Stanley and Elizabeth Griffin and was sentenced to death. He also pleaded guilty to the murders of the other 3 women and was given a life sentence for each murder, as well as 17 to life in prison for the other charges.
And Sean Great, sentenced to death. The convicted Ashland killer learned his fate today in a packed courtroom with a sea of purple honoring those victims' lives. Channel 3's Amani Abraham was there as the victims' families spoke.
You know, I've been waiting a long time to see you, man.
Following weeks of Sean Great's murder trial, families of the victims didn't hold back their words when they spoke directly to the man convicted of killing Stacey Stanley and Elizabeth Griffith, both found dead in his home as a 3rd woman escaped.
You know, you took advantage of that woman and my mother like they were nothing. That doesn't make you a tough guy. It just makes you evil.
Hours before he would learn his fate, Great spoke directly to the victims' families.
I can't say I'm normal, but you know, I know right from wrong. I ask you maybe to forgive me. Find in your heart someday. I know not today, but someday.
His words followed by more than an hour of victim impact statements, family expressing their heartache left behind, and a feeling that his punishment does not fit the crime.
Real justice would be for you to come with me for about 5 minutes. Burn in hell.
You are evil. God tells me to forgive you. And only because he said it, I'll forgive you, but I don't feel it in my heart.
You're a sadistic murderer.
Death by lethal injection. The judge's ruling followed the jury's recommendation.
Court further orders that each of the death penalties be carried out by appropriate authorities on September 13, 2018, which would be the 2-year anniversary of Mr. Great's discovery.
And as family embraced one another, they gathered on the steps of the courthouse, singing Amazing Grace before releasing balloons in honor of the women.
Before his sentencing, Sean expressed his fear of facing the death penalty, allegedly saying to the officers, and I quote, "I really want to stay alive through all this. I would have loved to have been able to do a lot, but I know I wouldn't have been able to get away with it." In December 2020, Sean lost his appeal against the death sentence, and he's now scheduled to be executed on March 19, 2025. The method of execution has yet to be determined since, as of 2020, the state of Ohio stopped using lethal injection and does not currently permit any other method. What do you think about this case? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more.